Hello and welcome to the CourseMaker podcast. Today I'm delighted to introduce Jake Jang from AlgoDaily. Jake is the founder of AlgoDaily, and I love your slogan, forget the leak code grind. So it's a full guided interview course with over 150 hours of high quality coding interview prep material. So Jake, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
So to begin with, Jake, can you tell us a bit about your background?
Absolutely. So I've been a software engineer for coming on 8 years now. I've been in the software industry for 8 years. I started off my career doing a mix of software engineering, mostly web development, and a little bit of project management. Eventually realized I did not like the project management part and went full into development. I've worked at quite a number of startups. I have a tendency to jump around startup to startup and throw in a mix of one or two large companies in there. But I've gotten a taste of pretty much every aspect of software engineering, from as I mentioned, the project management side to the development side. But also I've been able to luckily try out some, team lead stuff, as well as work on both the low level coding aspect as well as make architectural decisions. And it's been a blast so far. Background wise, I'm from New York. I was born in China, actually. I grew up in New York. Yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
Great. I can definitely relate, having also started out doing some more project management consultancy sort of stuff myself. Was there one particular moment where you thought, okay, I'm really going to go more down the development path, a turning point, if you will?
Yeah, it was. It was. I don't think there was a specific point. It was more the loss, the feeling of not having any control over final outcome of a certain project. As a project manager, you kind of have to be able to influence without direct control, and it's a very, very difficult thing to do and requires the participation and cooperation of a lot of people who might not be as cooperative as you would hope. And I found that pretty challenging, at least for my personality type. And so I don't think it was any direct moment, but it was a year-long thing, year-long dive, soul-searching aspect of it that eventually led to that conclusion.
And what was the transition like for you getting more into development?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually had a pretty unique transition. And this is something I actually recommend to students who are looking to break into software engineering from more of a non-technical role. So my first development job was actually more of an integrations engineering kind of a role. So I was mostly writing code, but for the purposes of integrations and configuration. So I didn't start off like writing, web apps or anything like that. I actually wrote tools that would help facilitate the transfer of data between two different applications. My official title was solutions engineer, but that gave me a really great introduction into the software development lifecycle and working on a software team. And I recommend this to people trying to break into software engineering, because it's not a pure quote unquote engineering role, but it's an easier transition in. A lot of these roles look for non-technical skills as well. So that definitely helped, coming from more of a project management background.
That's a really interesting entry into the field. Yeah, okay. So you're writing these tools, working as a solution engineer, and then eventually you've made your way into a variety of other sorts of technical roles. When did you switch away from more of the solution engineer stuff?
It was pretty much within year one. I think solutions engineering gave me a taste of full software engineering development. It's kind of hard to describe these transitions, because it was a pretty gradual transition. I basically became more and more technical over time, and before you know it, I was able to just apply to software engineering roles.
And were you mostly learning on the job, or did you do a lot of study outside work as well?
It was a mix of both. I actually got my master's in computer science while I was making that transition, which definitely helped a lot. I would say about 50% was off hours, studying or taking classes, and then 50% learning on the job.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm sort of, you can probably tell, but I'm warming up to us talking about AlgoDaily because I think some of
Yeah.
the tools and techniques and all the different ways that people learn through that tool are very, very interesting. So do you want to start to introduce how you came to come up with the idea? What was the
Yeah.
initial spark?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I started off in a non-technical role and eventually moved into a technical role through a series of job hops as well as getting education outside of work. But my frustration with the technical interview process was discovered very, very early on, or rather, it came about very, very early on. I remember the first time I found out I had to do a coding interview, I was very disappointed with how complex the materials to help people prepare were. I remember, if you're a developer, you know that the go-to recommendation for technical interviews is a book called Cracking the Coding Interview.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
it's a pretty much a legendary book at this point. I, as someone who was a new programmer and new into software engineering, I just found it very, very, very intimidating. If you're coming from a non-technical background, especially whether it's a boot camp or whether it's a hybrid role like I was, it's just very, very difficult to get into the more computer sciencey aspects of things. And so I just read that book and I was just incredibly incredibly stunned that people would sit down and read an 800-page or however long it is, maybe 700-page computer science book front to back. I just couldn't believe anyone could do this. And so I started looking for other resources that could help me. Personally, I'm a visual learner. I have to see diagrams and I have to see things in motion. And so I found that LeetCode, which was interactive and helped, but the explanations weren't too great. And so I tried to create something for myself that would serve as a reference in the future. And that's how I came up with the idea for AlgoDaily.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, cracking the coding interview is definitely a door stopper. Um,
Yeah. Have you read it, Chris? Or have
Well,
you
parts
heard
of
of
it,
it?
parts of it. Like you say, it is the go-to. Yeah. So I mean, let's dig into more about the collection of different sort of media and tools that are there in Algo Daily. Because I was having a browse, and you've got sort of a whole mix of interactive materials where you can actually write code in the browser combined with videos and more long form text examples, as well as sort of cheat sheets. There's a whole variety of different tools in there. So how did you go about deciding what to put in?
The angle that I came from was quality over quantity. If you look at the other technical interview prep sites and materials, there's hundreds, sometimes thousands of questions. My belief has always been that it's better to study a small subset of all the possible questions out there, perhaps the most common ones, and really go deep in them. And so, like you mentioned, AlgoDaily has several learning angles for each problem. So when you come on AlgoDaily and you arrive at a problem, you can visualize it both via diagrams. We have numerous illustrations on the site to help you, actually see what's happening or what's expected of a solution. You can also step through the code. We have a little visualize button that lets you actually step through and see what's happening at every breakpoint. You mentioned the text explanations for people who just like to read through and understand what's happening, and of course the actual editor itself where you can try out code. I think personally that I've always thought of the way AlgoDaily's been built as the way I wanted to learn. I like to just try everything. I need to see it. I need to play with it. I need to retain it. And the only way I found was by trying to solve it through multiple different ways and seeing it through a few different methods.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And do you have any sense from your students of if there's one particular way that they prefer, or do you really think it's about the mix?
Yeah, from what I've from the testimonials that I've heard, there are people who prefer one style over the other. I would say a small percentage, maybe 20% are like me. They like to have every aspect available or every angle of study available. But most people, if they're video people, will just watch the videos. If they're diagrams people, will just look through the diagrams and read the text. And if they're more hands-on, they'll just play with the code. It's interesting. I've always found learning styles just fascinating. The fact that you and I could have the same materials given to us and derive completely different results and outcomes from it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I'd like to ask more generally. Like, let's put ourselves in the shoes of a student who's perhaps somebody who is making a transition into software engineering or a technical field. What advice would you give to them about how to go about making that transition effectively? Because, like you say, it can be very intimidating. There's an awful lot of material, and obviously, with AlgoDaily, you're helping them to approach that. But what would you say to somebody in that position?
So, is the question what are their goals? I would guess.
Well, let's say it's somebody who's in a position similar to you were those years
Yeah.
ago. You're working as a project manager or in some non-technical field, and you're trying to switch over more into software engineering. It's actually a transition I've made myself as well. So this is
Yeah.
familiar. Where do you begin? How do you tackle that challenge?
It's quite a big question because it really depends on the individual and the circumstance. I think the one thing you have to do is, of course, there's so many different ways to break into the field now. If I could do it all over again, I think that I would encourage myself to do more projects,
Right.
to create some projects of my own. So AlgoDaily.com is built from scratch using Rails and React, and I have probably learned more from the building of that in a compressed time span than I have in any job. To go back to your question, I guess I would say the first thing is to find your motivation and make sure you're taking the actions required for that specific motivation. And by that, I mean, if you're in it for the money, you should take a different path than if you're trying to start a SaaS business versus if you're trying to just be a general software engineer. And the reason is this: if you're trying to break into Facebook, Google, Amazon, the usual cast of FANG, shops, it's pretty much you have to master algorithms and data structures. And I would even go as far as to say, maybe don't spend as much time on personal projects and focus more on algorithms and data structures, because that's really what will get your foot in the door for those specific companies. Now, if it's to be a general software engineer, I would say, work on projects, find an application to build and just, go crazy on it, just find tutorials and learn as much as you can there. And then if it's to build something for yourself, I would say, question if you even want to be a software engineer. I've noticed, especially like on sites like Indie Hackers, there's people who ask, do I need to learn a code in order to launch a software business? And I don't think you do at all. I think at this point, if you're looking to start a software business and not be a software engineer, there's so many no code and low code tools that are available. Sites like Teachable, sites like what's the website builder that's really popular nowadays?
You're thinking of like a Squarespace or a Wix, those kind of ones.
Exactly. Yeah. So I guess I would say the most important thing is to find your motivation and take the path that's required of that specific motivation, if that answers your question, Chris.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very comprehensive answer. And I like how you began thinking with motivation. To draw it back to AlgoDaily, one thing that I noticed you have in there is this daily email.
Yeah.
That makes up part of the course. And I find these sorts of It's almost like a little touch of accountability, or at least habit building, right? That seems to be so important, like consistency. Is that something that you consciously decided to add?
Yes, definitely. I know I personally had a very hard time practicing leak code every single day. The guilt of missing an email actually gets a lot of people active in their studies. I think it's especially I think in the course of preparing for interviews, especially technical interviews where you know you're going to get grilled, it's the impending anxiety of the interview causes a lot of people to procrastinate. It's something that I found very difficult. For listeners or viewers who might not know, technical interviews are extremely grueling. Because
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been there, but standing in front of a whiteboard and you have this person who's just judging your every move and everything you say. It's quite it's quite excruciating. And a lot of people know that they need to do some form of daily study to prepare for these interviews, but it's really hard when the thought of that is lingering. And I can understand why people would procrastinate as a result. So the daily email is like you said, like an accountability tool. And it also simplifies the study process because you get one interview question a day. You open up the email, you solve it, and then you're done for the day. It also helps with breaking up the curriculum, which is quite large at this point. There's over 200 tutorials on the site at this point, and hours and hours of videos and visualizations. So it gives you a nice small sliver of the course to do on a daily basis, and it makes sure that you're aware of what you need to do. And it does give you a little bit of guilt if you miss that email or if you miss that day's actions, but you can always pick it back up the next day.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that. I think more courses should think about that kind of little hook to keep people engaged and to make things more bite-sized. So I think that, yeah, that's a really cool feature that jumped out at me. Are there
Yeah.
any other parts of Algo Daily that maybe are a little unusual compared to the current resources that are out there?
Yeah. The one thing we have that no other course has is the ability to step through solutions and see what's happening at every breakpoint. It's very similar to putting a breakpoint in code and then stepping through it using a debugger. And the reason people love this feature is because algorithms are very conceptually hard. There's a lot that you have to hold in your head as you solve these kinds of problems. And being able to see what's going on, see the state of the problem, if you will, at every line, and then step through and see how that changed, it really helps with developing that intuition that you need when you're actually being interviewed. It helps to kind of give you the practice of thinking like a machine. And oftentimes in interviews, interviewers will ask you to conduct a dry run of the code. And this does a really good job of helping you prepare for that. It's a very beloved feature of AlgoDaily.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really think it's a great blend of different resources that you've put into this product. So, I mean, kudos for putting that all together, especially all custom from the sound of things.
Yeah, I appreciate
Nice
the
work.
kind words. Thank you. Appreciate it.
What's next for Algo Daily? What are the plans?
Oh, yeah. So more videos. the for about 2 years, it was mostly the visualizations, the text, and the illustrations. But people really enjoy watching videos. I'm not sure if it's because you kind of get the sense that somebody's explaining something to you. So there's the feel of perhaps being tutored. But people really like videos. And so I have a small team and myself that's working on ensuring that all the problems on the site have a video component to it. And so that's in the works.
Nice. Well, thanks ever so much for coming on, Jake. It's been really interesting hearing about you and your product. Where can people go to find out more about you and Algo Daily?
Yeah, absolutely. AlgoDaily.com would be the best place to reach the course, to reach myself. And yeah, and I appreciate you for having me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. Bye for now.